There's a question that haunts psychology, a question too dangerous to ask out loud. What would happen if you took good, kind, ordinary people and gave them absolute power over others? Would they stay kind, or would they become the very thing they fear? For years, no one dared to test it. It sounded like a horror story, not science. But one man did, and what he discovered was so disturbing that the world tried to forget it ever happened. Power doesn't shout, it whispers. It seeps into your voice, your posture, your smile, until you no longer remember what you looked like before you had it. Evil isn't born, it's learned, rehearsed, practiced in silence until it becomes instinct. That was the seed behind an experiment, one meant to reveal what power does to the mind when no one's watching. Not on battlefields or in politics, but in an ordinary room with ordinary people. It didn't begin in a prison. It began in a classroom. But by the time it ended, that classroom had turned into something far darker. 24 college students were chosen. Smart, healthy, ordinary. The kind who spent evenings talking about classes and weekend plans. They weren't soldiers. They weren't criminals. Just people. And yet, when the game began, they became something else entirely. Half were assigned as guards. The others, prisoners. The setting was simple. A fake prison built in the basement of a university. But the mind doesn't care whether the walls are real. The moment you strip someone of their freedom and hand another the authority to control it, reality bends. The uniforms were plain, the sunglasses mirrored, and the rules minimal. It was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it barely survived one. At first, it was awkward. The guards joked about their roles. The prisoners laughed back. It felt like theater, like everyone knew they were pretending. But power doesn't stay pretend for long. It wants to be felt. It wants to be used. Something happens when you give someone a uniform. It disconnects them from themselves. The name fades. The face fades. What's left is the role, and the role begins to think for you. By the second day, laughter turned into silence. The guards started to experiment not with data, but with dominance. They gave orders just to see what would happen. And when the prisoners obeyed, they felt something addictive awaken inside them. Control. Soon, the guards weren't enforcing the experiment. They were enjoying it. They invented punishments, forced prisoners to do push-ups, clean toilets, march in silence. They shouted, they mocked, they stripped them of names and replaced them with numbers. And the prisoners, the same people who had joked the day before, began to crack. They stopped eating. They stopped resisting. They started to believe they deserved it. One prisoner began to cry uncontrollably. Another screamed through the night. Some tried to revolt, but the guards crushed it. Zimbardo's team called it role immersion. But it was more than that, it was identity erosion. They weren't acting anymore. They were becoming what their labels demanded. It's strange how fast the human mind bends. You'd think conscience would scream, but it doesn't. It negotiates. It says, this is just an experiment. No one's really getting hurt. And with that small lie, cruelty becomes logic. What no one expected was how fast the transformation happened. It didn't take years of ideology or trauma. It took hours. That's how fragile morality is: one uniform, one order, one moment of looking away. Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist running the experiment, was supposed to be the observer, but even he wasn't immune. He began to see the students not as participants but as actual inmates. He stopped being a scientist and started acting like a warden. When one of the students had an emotional breakdown, he didn't end the study, he negotiated, like a man running a real prison. The illusion had swallowed everyone: guards, prisoners, researchers alike. It became a miniature world with its own laws, its own language, its own morality. And that's what power does. It builds realities inside realities, until the outside world stops existing. It took an outsider, someone untouched by the power, to break it. A woman walked in, saw what was happening, and asked him the only question that mattered. What are you doing to these people? It was the first time anyone had spoken to him like he was human again. And that's when the illusion cracked. The experiment was meant to last 2 weeks. It ended after 6 days. But the damage it revealed has never healed. It showed that evil isn't something you're born with. It's something you learn to justify. Given the right conditions, anyone can become a tyrant. And given the wrong conditions, anyone can become a prisoner, obedient, silent, broken. People like to think morality is a fixed trait, but it's not. It's environmental, contextual, fluid. The line between good and evil isn't between people, it's inside each person. And that line shifts depending on the room you're standing in. The Stanford Prison Experiment didn't happen in a faraway country or during wartime. It happened in a college basement, among young men who wanted a little extra money. That's what makes it terrifying, the ordinariness of it all. It wasn't the setting that created cruelty, it was the permission. The moment they were told, "You're the guard now," something inside them changed. They stopped seeing the others as equals. They saw them as objects. And once you reduce someone to an object, empathy dies. One of the guards later said, "I thought I was a good person, but the power made me forget." That's the truth. Most people run from power doesn't corrupt by force. It corrupts by invitation. It offers you a chance to become untouchable, and you accept without realizing what you're losing. And the prisoners? They learned a different kind of truth, that submission also rewires you. When enough people tell you you're powerless, you start to believe it. You stop questioning. You stop fighting. You just survive. And when survival becomes your only purpose, your humanity begins to fade. Zimbardo ended the experiment, but the mirror it held up still stands. Because even now, decades later, we're still living inside its results. Every time someone abuses authority, every time someone obeys blindly, every time silence replaces conscience, the experiment continues. You see it in workplaces, where bosses become wardens. In politics, where followers defend what they once condemned. In relationships, where control masquerades as love. The same mechanism, the same psychology, the same descent. Power is a mirror. It doesn't show you who you want to be. It shows you who you already are when no one can stop you. That's why the most dangerous people aren't the ones who seek power, but the ones who believe they're too moral to be corrupted by it. And maybe that's the real horror of the Stanford Prison Experiment, not what happened in that basement, but what it revealed about the rest of us. Because if the only thing separating decency from cruelty is circumstance, then morality is a luxury one. We can lose the moment the world gives us a title, a uniform, or an order. So, maybe the question isn't what those students did in 1971. Maybe the question is what you would do if the world handed you a key, a title, and a little too much power, and told you, "Go ahead, you're in charge now."